Hello, UK Crime Book Club. We are here for the first of two sessions today. We've got Caroline Maston coming at you with Bloody Scotland winners later on. For now, we have Michelle Dunne, and I'm so excited to talk about the book. So, you can see the Hotel Maid behind you. So, have you got a copy to show off and tell us a little bit about the
Here's
book?
what I made earlier.
You are so prepared.
Aren't I? That doesn't happen very often. So, I'm ahead of the game tonight.
Absolutely.
Yes. So the Hotel Maid is it's a book about a hotel maid. Well, the title gives that away. So we have June Calloway is our maid, and June is one of the best employees that the Cedarwood Manor Hotel has ever had. And the Cedarwood Manor is probably a character in itself, actually. It's a very high-end boutique hotel that's exclusively for the very, very wealthy. And as such, it has its return VIP guests. And one of those guests is Mrs. Erica Kelly, who incidentally is hated by every other character in this book. So the story starts with June arriving to clean Mrs. Kelly's room to find that Erica Kelly has been murdered in the room. But before she has a chance to react or respond or call anybody, the police show up because Erica Kelly has called them to report her 10-year-old daughter, Mia, missing from the hotel. So there we have our dual mystery there. We have our murder and our missing 10-year-old girl. So it's told from the point of view of 2 points of view, from June's and from 10-year-old Mia Kelly's. So through the two of them, we get a very good look at all of the characters inside the hotel, outside the hotel, all of the secrets that they're keeping and how those secrets connect them, and brings us to a pretty grisly end.
No comment. So when you were starting out with this one, did you have an idea of how everything was going to wrap up, or did this develop as you were writing? Trying to be really careful.
Well, I'm not much of a the whole plotter or pantser question, do I plot or fly by the seat of my pants? And I tend to fly by the seat of my pants in life and in writing. But yeah, so when I'm writing, I have a general idea of where I want to go. So I've opened with a prologue, which is June finding Erica Kelly murdered. So I obviously know where it's going to end up. But as for getting from A to B, not so much. I tend to just start writing and then I surprise myself. The twist will happen and I'm surprised by it. But that's the part of writing actually that I love. I'm like, for me, it's like reading. I like to be surprised when I'm reading and I like to be surprised when I'm writing. So yeah, so it tends to develop. Sometimes I can see how one thing might lead to another, to another, to another. But a lot of the time I don't, especially with the first draft. My first draft is just blurting down everything as it's happening. And then obviously you go back and you connect the dots a little bit better. So yeah, my first time round, no, I don't generally know what's happening.
I found June really likable. I don't have to like the main character, but I really did. She's really good at blending into the background when she needs to, and being more confident and speaking up when she needs to around the hotel and in a home life. It's set in several different homes, but the hotel having a personality that's kind of at odds with June's personality was really lovely.
Yeah, there's kind of mixed opinions about June. Some people found her a little bit unlikable. I like her too, but I like to give a reader that little bit of conflict because none of us are 100% likable all the time anyway. And I like to take very ordinary people and put them in extraordinary circumstances, or maybe bring them through an extraordinary amount of trauma. And if you do that with a normal person, you're not going to get the glowing, shiny version of that person on the other end of it. So I do like to just you know, sometimes same with my last book, The Good Girl, as well. You have a character who, in that, you're opening, you basically know she's killing somebody in the very opening scene, and you know you should not be rooting for this person because she's up to no good at all. And yet, the more you learn about her, and the same with June, the more you learn about her and her life and what she's been through, the more you find yourself rooting for them, whether you feel you should be or not. And I love that conflict. I love to have a character who's not 100% the type of person you might want to hang out with every day, but you kind of you root for them at the same time.
She's got a very interesting life because of that, hasn't she? So she's not really kind of interested in making friends with, you know, the other staff at the hotel, but she's got kind of a good working relationship with the boss Liz, who can be kind of bristly, but you know, we see the non-hotel manager kind of side of her as well, you know, the real Liz. So that's really nice. And then we've got, you know, June's living with Tess, her friend who is family to her, and we see a different side of June there as well. So it's really nice to see all of these aspects of her personality.
Yeah, and actually, the environment of the hotel and Liz were inspired by my first summer out of school before I went into the army and did all of that. I spent a summer in the Isle of Man working in a hotel that was a castle. It's shut down now. It actually gets a little cameo appearance in the end of this. But I worked in that hotel where we were basically the manager. She was in my head when I was writing Liz because she had that kind of demeanor. She was very much about business. And we were basically told to all but genuflect when a guest came along, or God forbid, the owners of the hotel came along. We were to speak only when spoken to. And it was very much that upstairs, downstairs kind of feel to it. And so a lot of the characters that I wrote in this, I saw them myself. I did all the jobs in that hotel. I was behind the bar. I was a waitress. I was on the cleaning staff when they were short staffed. I did all those roles. So you can see all of those people every day. And so that's where that kind of inspiration came from. And yeah, so June's home life then, like June is a young girl, she's in her 20s. She's living with a woman in her 80s. And that's really the only like she has no social life. She has no circle of friends. Her life revolves around Tess, that 80-odd-year-old woman that she lives with, and the hotel. And as you say, she doesn't interact socially with anybody there. So yeah, it's but again, then we discover all the reasons behind that and why she is so socially awkward. I don't know if I'd call her socially awkward. It's kind of it's a choice, really. I think she lives the way she
can kind of turn it on and off, can't she?
Yes, exactly. She can, and she can be what people want her to be in any given situation. I think so. Yeah, she's clever.
Laura has said that's where she remembers you from. You wrote The Invisible. She enjoyed it on Pigeonhole 2 years ago. Hi, Laura.
Pigeonhole scared me. Actually, it was scary and brilliant at the same time because I
Not
had
the
never
first person to say that to me.
I had never experienced Pigeonhole before, and so you've all these readers and all the comments coming through, and it's fantastic. But at the same time, you're terrified of somebody saying something negative, and then all of a sudden it could be a big thing. And as a writer, you're really like you're holding your breath every day when the staves come out. But it was fantastic, and actually, luckily, The Invisible and I think While Nobody Was Watching was on there as well. They both did really well, thankfully, there. So that's why it was brilliant but terrifying at the same time.
Because not every author reads the reviews, so to throw yourself into something like Pigeonhole, yeah, I can understand why that would be not even just a bit daunting, incredibly terrifying.
It's terrifying. It really is, because it's live, it's happening, and readers are amazing. They're fun. Like, I know I do it myself as well. You get totally absorbed in the characters, and some comments were coming going, "Oh my God, don't let this happen to her," and "Oh, please let this be okay." And it's like it's fiction. It's okay. It's not happening. It's all right. But that's kind of what's brilliant about it as well, because you're like that in your head about your own characters. You hold them so close to your heart, and you don't want anything bad to happen to them. but then sometimes you have to kill them. But other than that, but yeah, it's Pigeonhole is crazy good.
So let's talk about Cedarwood Manor Hotel.
Yes.
So based on a real place, obviously, as you've said, but so the actual building, is it as it's described in the book, or is it just
So
loosely based?
do you know what? It's based on a place very near me here. There's a resort near here called the Fota Island Resort and Spa, and it's a beautiful big hotel. It's only been built in the last probably 10 years or so. The grounds all around it are exactly as I've described in the book. But then on another part of Fota Island, like you have a wildlife park, you have this like national gardens. It's a beautiful place. But there's an old house. It's Fota House and has a really long history, and that's the building that I've used as the Cedarwood Manor. So I've basically taken that building and transplanted it over to where the 5-star hotel now is. So yeah, it's all there in my head, and you can do tours of Fota House. And so I've done those tours, and so I've seen the staff quarters and the wealthy family who it was their family home at one point. So yeah, it's a mix of the two. I've taken a building and landed it somewhere else.
And
But the grounds are
as we know, kind of Mrs. Keller, she's right at the beginning. We know you've already said we know that she dies, and then we're trying to unravel the kind of tale. But she really is not the most likable person at all.
She's deplorable.
She really is. There's a
She's
scene where this just gives an insight into a character, but it doesn't give anything away. There's a scene where she has she wants there's a lady and 2 children walking in the grounds. Do you want to tell this? Because it's a really good, kind of in some books where we have the save the cat moment and we're showing that the bad guy's got a heart because look how well he treats this cat. And you have flipped that in a genius way.
Yes. So the actual Fota grounds it's somewhere where I would go for a run every now and again, or local people would go out there and use the trail for walking or whatever. So in one of the scenes, June comes into the room and Erica Kelly is standing by her window, hands on the hips, and she's raging. And she starts ranting at June about, look at this, I'm paying all this money, and look what's going on. So basically outside the window, there was a poor, bedraggled mother with 2 toddler twins, and the twins were in their puddle suits and they were running around the garden, laughing and screaming and doing what kids do. And the mother looks exhausted, like only, a mother of toddlers can. And she's like, get them, they shouldn't be here. And basically, anyway, she calls security to get rid of them because she, in her 3rd floor room with her soundproof windows and everything else, is totally disturbed by the noise they're making that June can't even hear. But yeah, she basically has them removed from the grounds because this hotel is for people like her and not people like them. So yeah, that's her character. That's the kind of charming individual she is.
And she kind of takes off from her home life, doesn't she? I paused a minute ago because I nearly said Mrs. Erin Keller, and I thought it's Erica. It's Erica. Erin Kelly is another author. So it was kind of in my head.
I'm sure she's lovely. She wouldn't want to hunt any children.
Oh no, there's no comparison there. Oh my word! Thank you for saying that. But we we see all these different sides because we don't only see her in the hotel. The same as with June, we see her life away from the hotel as well. And she's just deplorable, as you said, is the word.
She is. And because we're getting to see her through Mia Kelly's eyes, her daughter, her 10-year-old daughter, you can see why somebody would want her dead and not just the hotel staff who she treats so badly. She's awful to everybody. And in her home life, she's no better. So her family, they have all of this money and they have this big grand house. But she's absolutely awful to everybody. So you can see how every member of her family would want her dead. You can see how Mia Kelly would be a target. You'd wonder what happened to her. How did she go missing? Because there are people who might want to harm her as well. So it really is a very close look at all the people who might want to harm both of them. And there's a few suspects there.
I won't go into that. We'll see. We'll see how far we get. But I remember reading and thinking about the various personalities that a hotel can have, and
Mm.
how you must, as with any kind of workplace, I suppose, you walk in the morning or the evening, whenever your shift is, and you know based on the atmosphere, you can kind of predict what kind of shift you're going to have. And I thought
Yeah.
that was really layered really well throughout. You know, you set it up really well, even before the scene happens, you kind of know something's coming. You've no idea what, and you've really no idea what when we actually get there. But
Yes.
having that setup of that, I think I'm quite a visceral reader, so I feel however the character's feeling. You know, if they're as well written as your characters, I really feel what they're going through. And to walk through the hotel and have this huge personality that you can, it's like a living, breathing thing.
Mm.
You must
And
have
that's
had
what
kind of a lot of fun with that as well.
I did. I did. I love the hotel, the Cedarwood Manor, and it's the same with that photo house as well.
Mm,
I don't know if I wouldn't be a supernatural kind of, not massively anyway. But when you walk in the door of certain buildings, you can feel an atmosphere. And so
yeah.
for June, she enters, the staff enter through the staff entrance, which is basically in the bowels of the building. You have this beautiful plush hotel, and then you have the downstairs dark labyrinth of corridors and, the pipes banging, and you've the noises of the machines, in the laundry and all this. So she walks in the door, and yeah, it's exactly like that. She walks in and she can tell the building feels depressed today. Something awful is about to happen. We're going to have a bad day, or somebody is missing. Like Liz would be down checking her watch when people arrive, and she's missing, and there's a tension in the air. So yeah, it is set up to, and June is very much in tune with the building. June absolutely loves the building that she works in, and she feels it as one of her only friends. Actually, she sees the building, the manor, as hers. It's her manor, and yeah, so she feels everything when she walks in that door.
When you kind of sit down to write and you're choosing the hotel, I mean, this could have been a very different book if it was in kind of like a Premier Inn or a Travelodge, one kind of level, and then you've got, higher up things, you've got the, I can't even think of a posh hotel.
I know. Same.
Royal Leonardo in London, one that I stayed in, or the Hastana, they were really lovely. But based on whichever one you chose, it was going to have to work in a certain way. So did you have Erica first, or did you have, and June, obviously, or did you have the type of hotel it was going to be in, the kind of atmosphere that was going to lend to the story first?
Well, when I first started writing this, actually, it kind of, my very first draft of it had kind of a Cluedo vibe to it. So I had all of the characters that I centered on were the guests. So I had all of these eccentric kind of guests there. So the hotel came first for me, and June. Obviously, I'll always start with my protagonist. She's always going to be the first. And the hotel, I set her in a hotel because I usually, up until now, I've written, my characters have all been based in Cork because I'm from Cork, and it's easy to write where you know. But this time I think I went for more of an international setting. She could be absolutely anywhere when you're in a hotel like that. But yeah, so I started with her and the hotel, and then I wanted to bring in these eccentric or weird or strange or awful characters that stay there. And suddenly then the others just kind of faded away as I was writing, and I went back and I ended up getting rid of them completely, pretty much, and centering on the staff and Erica. So I just, as much as I hate Erica, I think she's a great character. And the fact that she is so awful, kind of, it makes it harder to find, or for the reader to know straight up who killed her, because so many people would love to. She's so bad, so yeah.
You were talking about inspiration earlier, and just before we went live, we talked very briefly about your previous career. So one doesn't necessarily lead straight to the other. You know, we get plenty of journalists, and we get lawyers, former lawyers, things like that. Um, Yours doesn't necessarily lead directly to the books that you write, which
No,
makes it more interesting.
yeah, the army. Yeah, that was. But I mean, I've always been a reader, so books were always a part of my life. And actually writing, I used to write just for like a therapy. I would have always written stories, and I was a storyteller, so I would talk and tell all these dramatic things that happened to me, but there'd be arms and legs thrown on everywhere just to make it a bit more fun. But actually, if I can tell you a story about the power of books. So when I was in the army, it was a long time ago. I was quite young, and I went to Lebanon with the UN at a time when there was no internet, there was no smartphones, there was no form of entertainment whatsoever. Because if a UN camp is a tiny little area that you can't leave, you can't do anything. We had no English speaking TV, we had nothing. And amazingly, because I was, at the time, of the 120 or 130 soldiers that were in this tiny area, there were no books. Nobody brought books. It was just, I don't know how this happened, but they didn't. But while we were there, it was my 21st birthday. And one of the presents I got was from my sister, who sent me 2 books. She sent me Bridget Jones's Diary, and before the movie, and Marion Keyes' Rachel's Holiday. And I remember at the time, I was purely like, if somebody didn't die violently in the opening chapters, it's not my genre to read. I was always a thriller reader. So I actually looked at them and I was like, oh, could you not have sent me something like more grisly? But anyway, as I happened, just boredom, I started with Bridget Jones's Diary. And anybody who read that when it came out, it was hilarious. It was so funny for the time, And I was working one night, and I worked in my work area was in a bunker, so I was in there one night, and I was reading that, and I was laughing out loud at whatever it was in. And this guy came in, and we would have called him one of the old sweats, which meant he was probably the same age I am now, which was ancient to us back then. So he came in and he's like, "What are you laughing at?" And so I was like, "Oh, this is hilarious." And it went on to become like nearly like contraband. So when I finished it, he came along and he just like slipped it out of my hand and actually stuck it up his jumper and ran off. Like he did not want anybody to see him with a women's fiction book. And the same thing happened with Marion Keyes, and I was reading that, and that was hilarious at the time as well. And same thing. So he took that. But those 2 books, those 2 women's fiction books. Now I was the only woman in that camp at that time, so it was a very testosterone fueled environment. And those 2 women's fiction books were passed around literally, like nobody wanted to be seen with it, nobody wanted to be seen taking it or reading it. And yet it ended up being the conversation in the canteen every night, guys laughing over Bridget Jones and laughing over the O'Sullivan sisters. And it was just hilarious to actually sit back and watch these people who would never, most of them weren't readers at all, or they certainly wouldn't read women's fiction, but to see how they lifted the mood in an area that was so hostile. We were, morale was low. We had no sleep because it was being shelled constantly, the area that we were in. It was awful. But these books had people laughing and reading something that they would never normally read. And I just thought that was really, really powerful. It was the power of books, whatever genre they're in. So that kind of made me want to get a little bit more serious about my writing. And I just wanted to create something that could have that effect on any reader, even one reader. If one reader reads your book and feels something, really feels something, I think that's a success.
I think when you've got people rooting for your characters, whether it's because they're deplorable and awful, or because they're really likable and you really want them to come through, I think that's just an amazing thing. And to have, I mean, I don't know how many people were there, but the fact that everyone knew that everyone was reading Bridget Jones's Diary.
And yet it
Rachel's
was
holiday.
very and stuffed up jumper. And he actually stuffed it up his jumper so nobody would see him with it. It was just hilarious. And even the conversations that were had, they were hushed and they were laughing, and nobody wanted to know. Well, if you haven't read it, you're not in this group. Don't look at us. It was funny, but it was powerful. Though it was to see how the mood lifted about something.
I'm
It was
thinking I've
fantastic.
got it on the shelf somewhere behind me. But anyone who doesn't know what it is, go and Google it.
Yeah,
It will. It's been around for a while now.
a long time.
A
Yeah, yeah.
long time. I've got the book, but I found because I watched the film first, I couldn't read it.
Yes, and that was the thing. So I went back and tried to read it a few years later, way after the movie, and it didn't have the same impact as it did the first time around. But that kind of comedy was new then,
Yeah.
and just in reading it, it read so well in that time. Like that was the end of the 90s. I'm showing my age now, but that was the end of the 90s, and it was just yeah, we didn't have as much, as I said, there was no internet then. So we didn't have we weren't bombarded with what we're bombarded with now. It was hilarious at the time.
It's making me wonder if one of your books is made into, or if the Hotel Maid is made into a TV show or a film, how close to the original would you want it to be? Would you become? I'm just thinking of the whole Bridget Jones book versus film, and there are differences. So, how comfortable would you be with somebody just kind of ripping things up and doing something different, or would you want it to stay true?
Well, there is a TV option on my Lindsay Ryan series. So The Invisible and While Nobody Is Watching, there is a TV option on that, and it's the whole series outline has been done up, and there's a script writer involved, and it's already very very different to the book. So we had obviously all these discussions about, in a nice way, how precious are you going to be about the whole thing? And
Yeah,
I suppose for
really
me,
boil down to the
yes,
important bit.
it took 50 questions to ask that just one, in the nicest way possible. And for me, what's important to me in that, and I suppose in all of them, is the character. I want to be able to, because all of my books so far are a little bit open-ended, in the sense that I could technically go back and write any of those characters again if I wanted to. I'm not saying I ever will. I probably will write another more Lindsay Ryan. Maybe I don't think I'm done with her yet, but I want that option to be there. So if that character is translated onto screen very very similarly to how I wrote her, then I have no problem with that. I have no problem with the storyline changing around her, because I think if you're handing it over to somebody like that, that's their profession, that's their area of expertise, whereas it's not mine. And they can see what a global TV audience wants. Whereas I'm just a book. I'm a writer for books and for a book audience, and that's what I'm writing for. So I want my characters. I would want my characters to stay true to how I wrote them.
I think one of the things that would be really easy with this one, with the Hotel Maid, is Kaz was interviewing Ben Aronovich a while ago, and he was talking about how when he wrote his Rivers of London series, because he'd previously worked in TV, he wrote it so it was as hard and expensive as possible for anybody to be able to turn his books into something on a screen. He did not want that. Yours is completely the opposite. You have got, some budget-friendly settings.
Yeah.
We're looking at Mia in a cellar. We're looking at June and Tess in a kind of a small flat. There's not many rooms, and there's not a lot of there's no expense in her house at all. You could use somewhere very basic for that. And then the money, I suppose, would go into maybe the hotel and Erica Kelly's family home. But even then, you could do that in a handful of rooms and then just an outside shot, So
Yeah,
actually, from your point of view, the way this is written is really good for a TV budget.
I hadn't thought of that, but now that you mention it, Let's start telling people more about that, will we? No, but you're right there. Like, there's only really 3 locations in the Hotel Maid. And even when we go to Erica Kelly's home, most of that takes place in the kitchen, really, in the kitchen, and maybe a sitting room from time to time. But yeah, there really are very few locations. The hotel is the central place for, and Erica's house for Mia. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's a good. Well, I thought it was a cunning plan, but now it will be.
It will be going forward. One location for all the rest of my books from here on.
Absolutely. I know it was a thing that when I used to watch kind of Friends, there were some episodes that were literally just shot in the apartment because it was cheaper. They had to save the budget for some big thing they were doing in Times Square or London or
that. But you're so right.
I'm good at some things. Kind of knowing where people spend the money on that.
Ideas are brewing here now.
So we should give everyone kind of a heads up about your other books you've briefly mentioned. So do you want to tell us all about the other things that you've written so far? Because I know I've got some psych thrillers to go and read.
Well, I've had a very busy year this year. So The Hotel Maid just came out in August. And I had The Good Girl came out, I have it here. The Good Girl came out in March of this year. So I've had 2 books out this year, which is unheard of for me. But yeah, so The Good Girl is about Grace Murphy. And as I said earlier on, it opens with basically telling us that Grace doesn't look like the type of woman who has a man cable tied to a chair, slowly dying in her spare room, but she does. So straight away, she's up to something awful. But her story, it's a very dark book. I didn't realize how dark until all those early reviews were coming in with trigger warning being mentioned everywhere in them. But yeah, it is quite dark, and there's some dark topics there. Grace has basically had a pretty awful life. But by the end of it, she's made very good friends with a police detective who was there for her when she was a child, and who was he gave her a safe haven in his police station. So they're very good friends, but he's a bit busy at the moment because there's men going missing all over Cork City. So he's tied up with that. Grace is doing what she's doing. And again, she's one of these people that she's up to something awful, but by the end, you nearly really, really want her to get away with it. So that's a real conflicting, dark psychological thriller. So if you're into dark ones, that's one. And before that, I had the Lindsay Ryan series, which is While Nobody Is Watching, was the first one, and The Invisible. And they're centered on Lindsay, who is a former Irish soldier and UN peacekeeper. So it was easy to write because I had that experience, but it's not a military book. So she has come home. She is no longer in the military, and she's trying to adapt to her a civilian life, but she has PTSD. So she has massive trauma. And in the first one, she's working with underprivileged children, basically juvenile delinquents, and she's doing a really good job with them. She would throw herself in front of a bus for an underdog, but she's very, very, very hard on herself. She's very self-destructive in how she deals with her PTSD. And she has a stalker in that book, but it's one of these things. Is it her PTSD? Is she imagining it, or is there actually somebody following her? So she's been compared a little bit to a female Jack Reacher. So she's that kind of transient character. And at the end of the first book, While Nobody Is Watching, she basically just walks away from her life. And in The Invisible, she's started up a new life somewhere else, and just gets involved in all sorts of trouble again for, in defense of the underdog. So I don't think I've finished with her yet. I think I will write another Lindsay Ryan book at some stage. But yeah, so that's it. And I have a new one due out again in April of next year. So I've just finished the first draft of that today.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I don't know, the first draft might be very different to what comes out in April. But yeah, so I'm excited about that. That's more of a domestic thriller. And it's about school bullying and the death of a teenage girl and the secrets that 2 families are keeping and how it all blows up. So yeah, that's what's coming, and that's what's happened, and that's what's coming.
I wrote down a quote from, so it's just a small bit from the Hotel Maid, because I wanted to remember exactly what you'd written, and it's something that I spent a lot of time thinking about afterwards.
Okay.
Normal, the only word in the English dictionary without a meaning. You would not believe how long I've spent thinking about that, because obviously there's a dictionary definition, but actually there's really no, there's no
No, well,
quantifying.
everybody's normal is completely different, isn't it? And for the characters in my book, in any of my books, their normal certainly isn't normal. So yeah, so what is normal? Which is
So
great to write. It's great to write somebody whose normal is not most people's normal.
that's the thing, because they all think they've got pretty standard normal lives.
Yeah.
And to them it is, and they probably wouldn't think it would be very interesting. But as a reader, you are leaning in all the way.
You are.
Um,
It's great to live vicariously through these characters, though, isn't it? And I think that's one of the joys of reading, because nobody wants to be really caught up in a grisly murder investigation,
no,
or they don't want the horrors of PTSD and all of these things, all of these traumas that the characters have gone through. Nobody wants that in real
no.
life, but you do want to be submerged in it temporarily and know you can be pulled back out of it safely again. And that's one of the joys of reading, isn't it? Especially the thriller genre, I think. I love it.
Yeah, I agree. Completely love it. When we are talking about normal and we think about Mia's childhood before she goes missing, it's tricky to kind of really just show what without reading it, just what a difficult childhood Mia is having.
Mm.
She sleeps in a cellar, a basement. She's basically kind of the unhired help, and she knows nothing else. She's at a certain time of day. She's got an older brother who's horrible. She's got a dad who doesn't really do or say much for most of the time, but she's trying to kind of get a grasp of who he is, and whether he's trying to trip her up because she doesn't want to upset her mammy. So
Mm.
she's got so much going on, and this is, to her, this is what every child's life's like, and she
Mm.
doesn't know any different. And that the
Yeah.
fact that that's her normal is devastating.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that Mia was adopted by the Kellys.
Yeah,
But she's treated like she was adopted just to basically fill a gap in that family and in that household, more than in the family. Because Erica certainly resents her quite
yeah,
strongly. And all she wants is all Mia wants is Erica's approval and her father's approval, and she hates her brother, obviously. He's awful, but again, it's she's so neglected and just but again, she's contented for a lot of the time. This is her life, this is just
yeah.
what she does. Everybody has their role in the family, and this is hers. And so that is quite sad for her to think that this is normal, this is how people live.
I
Yeah.
think you pointing out that she was adopted, it's not a spoiler at all. It does give us an insight into the fact that she's just looking for somebody's approval, like you said,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
she really doesn't know any different. And she's been told, your birth mother didn't want you, so you're
Mm.
here, and we'll take care of you. And this to her is people taking care of her, and she's
and
no
and she's
idea of
supposed to
anything
be,
else.
yeah, and she's expected to be very grateful for that as well. But she's 10 years old now, and her brother says some very cruel things to her.
Yeah.
And so this is how the secrets start to come out, and how Mia starts asking questions about her life, and actually, is this normal? And what's actually what's my background, what's my history, where did I come from, and all that. And so that's when the secrets start to spill out, is when Mia starts asking questions about her life.
I think we've got I might rephrase that one. There is night and day between, the lives that people are showing and the lives that they're actually living. So I think that's a really interesting contrast as well.
And isn't that the case in real life? The whole Instagram versus reality. I mean, people outwardly show what they think the world wants to see, or how they want to be perceived is what they show the world. But what goes on when the cameras are off and behind closed doors can be nothing like that. I mean, everybody's just putting their best foot forward. But that's exactly it. I mean, what people see isn't always what people get.
Laura Hamilton asked one of my favourite questions earlier. Have you ever acted out a scene to help with the writing process? So we have had some story. There are people who will maybe read the dialogue out, check that it flows and that it sounds right. We've had we had an author, Mark Richards, who did had a fight with his son on the end of Whitby Pier to see how that would work. We've had where Kat Yaff had her husband tie her to a chair so she could try and break free. My husband might leave me there, so I would never offer that. And any kind of weird and wonderful researching ways for your books, basically.
No, I haven't physically acted anything out. I do read back over my work obsessively, to the point where I can nearly recite my whole book by the time I send it off. Just like, as you said, just to make sure everything flows. And I like to write kind of conversationally, as if I'm just telling a story. So I like to read it to make sure that that's the case. And for research, I mean, I use all the people that I know. Like, I have a lot of old colleagues who would have gone into the police force, the Gardaí here. I contact them a lot. And I go through it. Those conversations can spiral. So you can ask somebody, what would the guards do in this situation? And I might get back, well, what do you mean? How is that going to happen? So then I go into this big whole dramatic, fictitious routine. And I get a phone call going, I'm not putting a response to that in writing. I'm going to ring you and tell you about it because I don't want to be incriminated if you're actually planning this. So it can, like, I talk through in detail with people about what would happen in certain situations, but no, I haven't acted anything out yet.
Yeah, we might have just given you an idea.
Yeah, another one.
I want to ask you about Spike Island because we've got just over 10 minutes left. So tell us everything. I saw lots of great posts about it.
Spike Island is mental. So it's Ireland's answer to Alcatraz, basically. It's a prison island. There's nothing else there. There's one way on, there's one way off, and that's one ferry. And when I grew up looking at Spike Island, it was a prison. I've seen prison riots over there.
Wow.
All sorts of things. It's also one of the most haunted places in Europe. It's on the Lonely Planet's top 10 tourist destinations in Europe. It's incredible. It's an incredible place with a very long and very, very dark history. If I went into it, I would talk far too long, but it's incredible.
12 hours.
Yeah, I could talk about it for hours. Like, there was torture, there was all sorts that went on in this place. And you could feel it the minute you step onto the island. But a few years ago, just as we came out of COVID, we have every year in September, we have a culture night in Ireland. And one of the coordinators who looks after it, I have no idea how she got my number. But I got a call from her asking, would I organize a crime writers event? And I just happened to be kind of sitting on a wall looking at Spike Island at the time. I was like, yeah, I'll do something on Spike Island, without even checking with Spike Island if it was okay. But that I say yes first. I always panic later then. So I did anyway. We ended up doing one crime writers event with myself, 3 other Cork crime writers, and I got a DJ, like a radio DJ, who was a massive book fan, to do the whole thing. And it was packed, and we were in this massive gun shed by night, surrounded by the prison walls and the barbed wire and everything, and it was fantastic. And when you're on a bit of a high after something goes well, and the managers on Spike Island said, that was really good, we should try to do that annually. And I said, forget about the single event. Let's do a whole festival. And I really regretted it about a month later when I was trying to organise it. But the first year was the first year was the following summer, and I just got really lucky with the guests that agreed to come. So I sent invitations to Mark Billingham, John Connolly, Liz Nugent, Andrea Mara, all of these people that I admire massively, expecting all of them to say no, because none of them knew me, none of them knew Spike Island. It was a non-existent literary festival, but I gave them all the history of the island and what a fantastic place it was. And amazingly, they all came back and said yes. So the first year, I got the most stellar lineup I could ever have gotten. It was a dream for a first year festival. And so then I was able to build on that year on year, because obviously when you're inviting people to festivals, they're going to look to see who else did the festival, because especially if it's a smaller one that people haven't heard of. So we just had our third year this year, and it was absolutely amazing. It was, I should mention, last year we got hit by Storm Betty, and boats had to be cancelled, and we were stranded on the island, on the most haunted island in Europe, stranded. But we ended up having to cancel a lot of our audience, but the authors had the best weekend. The rest of the festival, it still did go ahead. The other 2 days went ahead, but it was fantastic, and it was one of the ones that will stick out in our memories for sure. But this year's one was just phenomenal. It was brilliant. So yeah, if you're somebody who likes to travel around to festivals, it's one of the most unique crime-themed literary festivals definitely in Ireland. It's just the location of it, the fact that all the authors, all the guests, everybody is put on this boat together. So there's no elitism. There's nobody, off in a green room waiting to show. Everyone's bundled in together, and then they're all trapped on the island for the same amount of time together. There's no getting away. So you have your event, but then you have your time to chat with the authors. You can go for a tour of the prison cells. You can go into the torture tunnels, which are pitch black and just, but you can do all of these things while you're at the festival. So there's so much included in your ticket. And then everybody piles back onto the same boat and comes home. And the chat and the songs and everything on the boat coming back, it's incredible. It really is very, very unique. So it'll be the end of August again next year. We'll be starting to plan very soon for next year again, but definitely it's one to put on your calendar if you're looking.
So where do people actually stay?
So in the town of Cove. So Cove.
So nobody can actually stay on the island. You go on there and then you leave in the evening.
Not intentionally. If you get stuck on the island, that's your own problem. But you don't want to get stuck on Spike Island. But no, so you'll stay in Cove, the town of Cove, which is stunning in itself. Actually, so many of the authors that came this year Googled Cove before they came, or they'd spoken to other author friends, and some of them brought their families with them. Some extended their stay on either side of the festival, just because it's a stunning town, and it's a tourist location as well. We get a lot of cruise ships and things like that in here. So it's stunning. It's a lovely place to come for a weekend or for a stay. And the Spike Island Festival is just a bonus weekend to come, really.
And you don't really regret it, do you?
Every single year, in the run up to the festival, you can ask any of my author friends, they'll tell you I'm adamantly never doing this again. But then it ends and I'm on that high again, and all of a sudden my application is going in for the Arts Council again, and my application is for funding. I'm asking them for funding for a festival that I'm not doing again. But inevitably I end up doing it because I love it. I love organising festivals, actually, and it's something that I fell into accidentally. But now I've joined the team of Murder One as well, which is the Dublin International Crime Writing Festival. They invited me to join the programming team after last year. They came to Spike Island last year. Sam Blake is the author. Vanessa Fox O'Loughlin, she runs that. And she came as one of my authors last year and invited me to join that team. So that's going to be on in 3 weeks' time. So I'm kind of we're up to here in Murder One at the moment, but I'm really excited about it. And it's going to be, the lineup is incredible. It's back to back compared to Spike Island, because of our location. We're very tied by, as I said, there's one way on, one way off. Tides affect everything. So you get the ferry on, you can only fit in so many events, and then everyone has to get the ferry back off again. So it's kind of more of an exclusive festival. We could have 2 or 3 events in a day, whereas Dublin have back to back to back to back to back events, and it's just massive. So yeah, so this is, I'm learning a lot as well from Murder One. I'm really excited about it.
Sounds like you've got 2 festivals. You might need a third. That magic number.
Because I have so much free time, I think
Absolutely.
I write my books on my laptop in my lap in the car while my child is playing football or doing basketball or whatever. So that's my. If I narrow that window any further, I fear what will happen.
No, completely agree with you.
Yeah,
we have got about 4 minutes left. Do you want to give us a recap? In fact, hold on. Before we do the recap, tell me about your launch party.
My launch party. Well, that was brilliant, but it wasn't what I planned. So because the Spike Island, the Hotel Maid came out on the 23rd of August, which was day 1 of the Spike Island Festival. And I planned to have the launch on Spike Island on Saturday, so that, because I had a brilliant panel set up for then. I had Joe Spain with Dr. Mary Cassidy and Arlene Hunt on a panel. And I thought I could hijack their crowd and just pretend they all came from my launch, which would be amazing. So that was my plan. But then the whole Brexit thing and whatever else, my books got held up between the UK and Ireland, so they never came on time. So I wasn't able to have the launch that day, which was just as well, because I actually would have been a basket case between running all over Spike Island as it was to do the launch. I don't know what I was thinking. But then Waterstones are fantastic. They're our book partner for Spike Island. So they held a launch for me in Waterstones the following week, and it's one of those things. It's like being 12 years old again and worrying about who's going to come to your party. I don't enjoy those events, just because of that, the nervousness, because it's on a Monday night in the city. I can never get to them myself when they're other people's launches. So I kind of had, my mother threatened that she had to come. So I was thinking, worst case scenario, I'm going to be sitting with Amy Jordan, was the author who launched my book for me. And I was, it's going to be me and Amy and my mother sitting here. But actually a lovely crowd turned up, and it was just, they're really around, I don't know, are we very lucky? I don't know. But around here, we have such a friendly group of crime fiction enthusiasts who turn up for everything. And they're so welcoming. They're so happy to be there, and they're so enthusiastic. So I had people like that there, and it was just a fantastic night. It was lovely. It really was. I don't know if I'd be rushing to do another launch again just because of the tension coming up to it, but thankfully it did turn out to be lovely.
It did sound a bit bonkers, the idea of doing those 2 big things on one day on Spike Island.
Yeah, but again,
at least
say yes to everything in panic.
Would you like to give us a recap of the Hotel Maid and tell everyone about June?
Sure. So June is our hotel maid who absolutely loves her job, lives for the hotel that she works in, and she finds the most unpopular guest, Erica Kelly, murdered in her room at the start of the book. And Erica has reported her 10-year-old daughter missing from the hotel. So we have the murder and the missing girl, and we have 2 points of view throughout the story, and tons of secrets, lots of twists. It's a very twisty book, and hopefully an ending that you don't see coming.
I did not see that coming.
Excellent. That's what I want to hear.
Even when you're kind of thinking, I'm not finishing my thought in case I inadvertently say something I shouldn't. Which I did earlier on when I said about Kaz. Kaz isn't on tonight with Chris Brookmeyer and Alan Gore. She's on tomorrow night. So Sam, get your facts straight. But no, thank you so much. I hope you come back and tell us more, when the TV shows are up and running and the next book's out. Come back.
Excellent.
And tell us more.
Sam, thank you so much. That was a lovely chat.
Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who's been watching.